Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're trying to cut through some of the noise around a really critical issue: public health, truth, and, well, how established institutions handle new information.
Or perhaps how they don't handle it sometimes.
Exactly. The sources we're looking at today, they really shed light on the courage it takes to speak out, these surprising psychological barriers that stop people accepting new facts, and the bigger systemic problems that maybe make speaking out necessary in the first place.
It's a complex picture, definitely.
So we're going to dig into that interplay: information resistance, trust, especially in the medical world. The aim here is to pull out the key insights, the stuff that challenges the usual narratives, really, to give you a shortcut to being better informed on something that affects all of us: your health, your trust in the system. Now, you've said many times, I believe, that not adhering to the truth is only going to cause great harm to public health and to patients. That seems like a really deep conviction. What's driven that for you over your career?
It really is at the core, yes.
Yeah.
My whole career, essentially, has involved pushing back against things that just didn't seem right. The appalling sugar situation, ultra-processed food becoming so dominant, the overprescription of medicines.
Right.
Even in my own field, cardiology, I've published and spoken out about the overuse of certain surgeries, heart stents, often trying to use mainstream media initially, actually, to get the word out.
Okay.
But the pandemic,
Yeah.
that was different. Suddenly there was this policy of suppression. Information was suppressed. There was coercion, mandates, censorship. It became clear that we had to use alternative ways to get the message across.
Which is why people saw you on platforms maybe they didn't expect.
Precisely. Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson's even shown interest. When the traditional doors felt shut, these alternative roasts became, well, vital. Absolutely vital.
That shift is really something: how information moves, how people access it. It completely changed the game, didn't it?
It really did.
You've also pointed out something interesting, that the biggest roadblocks to truth aren't always intellectual, they're psychological. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yes, I focused on this in a recent keynote, actually. It's fascinating. You have things like willful blindness, which the evolutionary psychologist Gad Saad talks about. Fear obviously plays a huge role.
Sure.
But maybe the biggest one is cognitive dissonance. That feeling of stress when you hold two conflicting ideas. And the surprising thing is, instead of changing their mind, people often just double down on what they believed before. It's easier than admitting they were wrong.
That makes sense. Psychologically, it's uncomfortable to be wrong.
Very. And you see it play out dramatically. Think about, say, a politician calling people who question the narrative racist and misogynists anti-science. That's not an intellectual argument. It's a psychological defense mechanism, really.
It really highlights how difficult it is to shift perspective, especially when beliefs are deeply held or, publicly stated. The stakes feel incredibly high then.
Immensely high. And that's why in that speech, I said there was one piece of data, just one, that everyone needed to grasp to understand the situation with the pandemic response, the Freeman study.
Okay, the Freeman study. What was the key takeaway?
It was a reanalysis. They went back to the original Pfizer and Moderna trial data. And the core finding was, well, it was stunning. Right from the beginning, the data showed you were 2 to 4 times more likely to suffer serious harm from the mRNA vaccine than you were to be hospitalized with COVID.
2 to 4 times more likely.
Yes, even after correcting the trial data. And this was the evidence base,
Yeah.
the very data that led to regulatory approval, and then the coercion, the mandates.
Wow. So presenting that data, especially in what you called the lion's den, what was that like? What was the reaction in the room?
It was quite something. I really tried to be respectful but assertive, just present the data clearly. And honestly, the reaction was heartening. There were no boos, none at all. I actually got a round of applause at the end. Yes. And afterwards, people came up to me. Some were just, gobsmacked was the word they used. I had 2 professors from Imperial College, a top transplant surgeon and an orthopedic surgeon, say to me quite directly, "This makes sense now. This fits with what I've been seeing in my own patients."
That must have felt validating, hearing that from colleagues.
It was. And it reinforces my belief, Yes, there's anger out there about mandates, about people losing jobs, and that's completely understandable. But I think many people who supported the rollout, they were working with very limited information. They were subjected to a lot of, well, propaganda, frankly.
So you think there's still a way to reach them?
I do. I think there's still a path. If the information is put forward in the right way, maybe at the right time by the right person, you can still connect. We also need to remember hindsight bias. Initially, the idea of widespread serious vaccine injury wasn't really on the radar for most people. The messaging was all about protecting the high-risk elderly.
That's a fair point. So you're starting to see some of these messages gain a bit more traction now, even in more mainstream places. How is that unfolding?
There have been some definite shifts, yes. The Telegraph on Sunday, for example, ran a full-page feature, which was significant in itself.
Okay.
And interestingly, the headline they initially showed me was changed online to something much stronger. The harm caused by the COVID vaccine has been catastrophic. That piece got huge engagement online, over 700 comments, which is a lot for the Telegraph.
That suggests an audience is ready for that conversation.
It seems so. And I'm also involved in advisory roles now, so the soft power influence, you could say, with a grassroots group called Maha Institute of Stroke Maha Action, which has links to people like Robert Kennedy Jr. and Jay Bhattacharya over in the U.S.
Right.
And I've recently become chief health advisor to a new group, Action on World Health. Nigel Farage is a co-founder. The specific aim there is to challenge the World Health Organization, call out its shortcomings, and push for significant reform, or maybe even its replacement.
That's quite a direct challenge to established bodies. The Telegraph article also mentioned your background, didn't it? Speaking out early on.
It did, yeah. Mentioned I wrote about institutional racism when I was just 16.
Yeah.
I guess I've always had this sense of justice, maybe a tendency to speak truth to power, to point out when institutions aren't working as they should.
Even if it causes friction.
Oh, absolutely. And it has. There's been ongoing, medical persecution from some colleagues. Not from patients, never from the public, but from within the profession itself. That continues.
You mentioned information getting suppressed earlier. Have you seen specific instances where key data, like that Freeman study, just gets left out, even when outlets seem to be covering the topic?
Oh, definitely. It's quite blatant sometimes. Take the Telegraph again.
Yep.
Despite that strong feature, a follow-up piece they ran, almost certainly, I'd say, cited a different study, a much lower quality one, looking at 99 million people, which concluded side effects were very rare.
And no mention of Freeman?
No mention. Completely omitted. Why? My guess is ideological blindness, maybe institutional ties to pharma. It's hard to say for sure, but it's suspicious. Then there was an interview I did with Krishnan and Guru Murthy on Channel 4 News. We spoke for a full hour. It was edited down to just 20 minutes for broadcast.
Significant cut.
Huge. Yeah. Yet, even with that limited exposure, the comments on Channel 4's own YouTube channel were overwhelmingly supportive. Extraordinary, really.
Interesting.
And maybe the most puzzling case involves The Lancet and its editor, Richard Horton. This is someone who, back in 2015, wrote a scathing editorial himself. He said, possibly half the published literature may simply be untrue, citing conflicts of interest, big pharma influence. He literally wrote, science has taken a turn towards darkness.
So you'd think he'd be receptive.
You would. And when I met him personally and brought up the Freeman paper, his initial reaction was positive. He acknowledged it was published in a serious journal, but then later he wrote this article. It wasn't exactly a hatchet job, but it implied the transparency movement was fueling anger and conspiracy theories based on one angry outburst at some meeting. And the most baffling part, he completely failed to mention the Freeman paper in that piece.
Despite having discussed it with you and acknowledging its source.
Exactly. So it's good these outlets are at least airing the discussion to some extent, but the consistent omission of what I consider the most crucial study, it's perplexing. It's baffling.
That pattern does seem hard to explain away as simple oversight. So, broadening this out, what are the deeper systemic issues you see driving this, the things that are really eroding trust in public health?
Well, trust has definitely taken a massive hit, and there are several big reasons, I think. One is that policies just haven't changed when the evidence changed. That's basic public health practice, as people like Simon Chapman in Australia have advised for years, but it didn't happen. Then there was the whole issue of natural immunity. It was largely ignored, dismissed even, despite evidence showing it was at least as good as vaccination at preventing infection, and almost certainly better at preventing severe disease and death.
That was a major point of contention for many.
Huge. And then you have these products rolled out under emergency use authorization. But where was the real discussion about the uncertainties? Where was genuine informed consent explaining that these were novel treatments without long-term data? It wasn't really there.
And the accountability.
That's the other key thing. In normal medicine, if a mistake is made, the standard process is clear. Acknowledge it, apologize, learn from it, put measures in place so it doesn't happen again. We have seen absolutely none of that at the public health leadership level regarding the pandemic response. Zero.
Why do you think that is?
Well, Follow the money, perhaps? Our regulators, the MHRA here in the UK, for example, get something like 86% of their funding from the pharmaceutical industry. 86%. So
Hmm.
when they claim they're independent, it's just, well, it's completely false, isn't it?
That level of funding inevitably raises questions about influence.
Of course. It leads directly into what some call the commercial determinants of health, or what I've started calling corporate tyranny. Big Pharma operates on a business model, let's be clear. And that model is fundamentally about getting as many people as possible to take as many drugs as possible for as long as possible.
Can you give an example?
Look at cholesterol drugs. People being pushed onto multiple statins, often unnecessarily. Or right now, look at the GLP-1 drugs, things like Ozempic being pushed for weight loss. I've said it before. I think these are going to be a public health disaster
Why disaster?
because it's often not the best way to manage weight long term. They cause significant muscle loss alongside fat loss, which isn't good, and we're seeing serious side effects reported bowel obstruction, pancreatitis. There have even been deaths linked to them. My analogy, and it's stark, I know, is I'm going to give you cancer to help you lose weight.
That's a very strong statement. Is there a cancer link?
Well, it's more about the risk-benefit calculation being skewed,
Mhm.
but also, concerningly, some oncologists and surgeons are reporting they're seeing more cases of unusual cancers lately. It's anecdotal at this stage, needs proper investigation, but it's a worrying signal on top of everything else.
It paints a picture where commercial interests might be overshadowing genuine health needs, potentially on a massive scale. The long-term impact on public health seems, well, quite concerning.
It is deeply concerning.
You've certainly covered a lot today, from your own advocacy and the fight for getting truth out there to these psychological hurdles we all face, and then these bigger systemic problems in media, regulation, and the influence of industry. It's a really complex web.
It is. And complex problems rarely have simple solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I think what's needed is a fundamental cultural shift.
How so?
We need to start judging people, especially those in public life, but really everyone, not on their image or fame or status or power,
Mm?
but simply on their conduct, their actions. That's what we should be teaching our kids.
A focus on character and integrity.
Exactly. Which brings me to the Nolan principles of public life. Selflessness, objectivity, integrity, accountability, honesty, openness, and leadership. 7 principles. I was in a large meeting recently, asked who could name all 7. Only one person could.
And who was that?
A corporate lawyer, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
But imagine if those principles were truly understood and consistently applied.
Yeah.
It would solve an awful lot of the problems we've been discussing.
That's a powerful thought to end on. So, building on everything we've talked about today, perhaps the question for you, the listener, is this. What does it really take for an individual, for an institution to admit error, to genuinely adapt when new evidence comes along? And what role can you play in demanding and helping to build a system that values transparency and integrity above all else?